Okay guys, today we're going to begin a new unit, Unit 12, and in this first section, 12-1, we're going to be looking at the surface area of prisms. Now this entire unit is going to be over surface area and volume of three-dimensional figures. And we start with the surface area of prisms. So let's talk about what a prism is. Okay, a prism is a three-dimensional object that has two congruent parallel bases. Two congruent parallel bases. So first of all, it's three-dimensional. And it's got two faces that are congruent, same size, same shape, and parallel, facing the same direction, right? And so let's just take a look at the parts here of a prism. So here we've got ourselves a prism, and so the two parts, right? Each side is called a face. Okay, each one of these segments here is called an edge, right? And the two-dimensional surfaces are called faces. Okay. Now, it has two faces that are congruent and parallel, same size facing each other, and those are called the bases. Okay. Then the faces that connect the bases are called lateral faces. So these are your two bases because they're congruent and parallel, the triangles. And then these rectangles, three of them, would be the lateral faces because they connect the bases together. Okay, so once again, to recap, okay, prism is made up of faces. It has two congruent parallel faces called bases, and faces that connect the bases called lateral faces. All right, so bases, lateral faces. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, so all of them are faces. Just these two congruent and parallel faces are called bases, and then the faces that connect the bases, or the sides of the base together, those are called lateral faces. Now, knowing these parts is important because first of all, you have to recognize whether or not it's a prism, and number two, you have to know the different parts in order to use the formulas correctly, right? So every one of these figures that we look at for surface area and for volume all have separate formulas, right? So you've got to be able to look at a figure and determine, okay, what type of figure is this? Is it a prism? Well, does it have two congruent parallel bases? Yes, so it's a prism. All right, and then now what are the different parts of this prism that I can plug into my formulas that we're going to take a look at here in a minute. Okay, so it is important to know the different parts. Right. Okay, so now you've got two types of areas when you're looking at a 3D figure. It's the lateral area, which is the area of the lateral faces, and the surface area, which is the area of all the faces, sometimes referred to as the total area. Okay, so right there you've got to understand the difference between the lateral faces and then the bases in order to be able to calculate lateral area or surface area correctly. Okay, all right, so now here are my two formulas. Okay, first of all, we have the lateral area formula, all right, and that's L equals capital P times H, okay, where P stands for the perimeter of the base, okay, and H here stands for the height of the prism. Okay, now let's talk about height of the prism for a minute. Height is not always from top to bottom. Depending on how the prism is turned, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be from top to bottom, but it's always from base to base. You always count the height from base to base, so that's very important. So perimeter is the distance around the base, and it can be either one. You don't have to do them both. Just count the perimeter of one base. And then the height of the prism, which is from base to base. So this is the lateral area formula. The full surface area is capital P times H plus 2B, where B stands for the area of the base. All right? And let's just stop to talk about why these formulas make sense. All right, if PH is the lateral area, right, and that's the area of the three lateral faces, to get the full surface area, all I would have to do is add the two bases to it. So that's 2 times the area of each base, right? And so that if this is the lateral area, this plus adding on the two bases back to it would give you the full area. Okay, so that's kind of what the formulas look like and where they come from. So again, very important to make sure to know what each letter stands for. P is the perimeter of the base. B is the area of the base. H is the height of the prism. Let's practice some of them. Okay, so here's the first one that we want to look at. We want to find the surface area. All right, first of all, and by the way, one thing that I failed to mention last time is the prism is named by the shape of its base. So if the bases are triangles, this is called a triangular prism. Likewise, this one is a triangular prism because which sides are the bases? Which faces are the bases? We have to be able to determine that to fill out the formulas correctly. Remember, the bases are congruent and parallel, so it would be the front and the back triangle. Those are your bases. Those are your bases. All right? So let's see if we can find the surface area. So we can write in first the formula for surface area. And by the way, if it wants lateral area, it'll ask us for lateral area, right? So if it says surface area, that means find the full surface area. So PH plus 2B. So write in the formula first. It's always good to write the formula in first because it helps you keep everything straight as you go and plug in and work the problem out. All right, so what does P stand for? P stands for the perimeter of the base. All right, so where's the base? So the perimeter of the base. Remember, the base of the prism is the triangle, right? The base of the prism is the triangle. Base doesn't mean bottom side. It means whatever is defined to be the two congruent parallel bases. So I need the perimeter of the base. So perimeter means all the way around. So I need to find the perimeter all the way around this triangle. Now you can do the front one or the back one. You don't have to do them both because they'll be the same. Why? Because they're congruent. All right. So this will be 4 plus 3. Now I don't have anything for this side, but remember these two are congruent. So if this triangle, the hypotenuse is 5, then in this one the hypotenuse is also 5. They have to match because they're congruent. So 3 plus 4 is 7. 7 plus 5 will make 12. The perimeter of the base is 12. All right? So 12 goes in for P, the perimeter all the way around the base, times. Now, H stands for the height of the prism, which don't forget is from base to base. Okay? So it's not necessarily from top to bottom. So the height is not 4. The height is from base to base, which is actually 8. So it's 12 times 8 plus, remember, base to base is the height, times 2. Okay, and to speak more about the height, this one is just turned over on its side. If it was leaned up on its base, then 8 would be from top to bottom. But when you take it and you turn it down, the height doesn't change. The height is still 8. And the example I always like to use is, if I lay down on the ground, the height of me is from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head. If I lay down on the ground, I'm not 1 foot tall. I'm still the same height, even though I'm laying on the ground, because it's from base to base. All right. So same thing here. If the prism's laying down sideways, this is still the height. Okay. Now, B stands for area of the base. Now, here's where you're going to have to go off to the side and do another calculation, because remember, we had an entire unit earlier this semester on area, right? So I need to find the area of the base. Well, what's the shape of the base? The base is a triangle. What's the formula for area of a triangle? It's 1/2 the base times the height. Okay? So here's where you have to go off to the side, calculate the area of the triangle, then plug it back into the big formula. So I need to find the area of this triangle. Well, it's 1/2. Well, what's the base of the triangle? 3 times the height of the triangle, 4. Base times height have to be perpendicular. So 3 times 4 is 12. Half of that is 6. And I'm going to plug this back in for capital B, which is 2 times 6. 6 is the area of the base. Now, let me say something here. This base and height is the base and the height of the triangle, which is 3 and 4. Okay, the base and height of the triangle. This is the base and height of the prism. So the base and the height of the prism is not the same as the base and the height of the triangle. Okay, the area of the base of the base and height of this triangle is 3 and 4, but the base and height of the prism is 6 and 8. So keep that in mind. This formula, the base and height, is for this formula, which is for the prism. All right, the base and height of the prism. This formula is for the base and height of the triangle, which is here and here. Okay, so make sure you understand that those are two different bases and heights. So now I can go in and finish it. And if I do 12 times 8 plus 2 times 6, you would see that the answer is 108. And typically surface area is expressed in square units, so that would be centimeters squared, feet squared, whatever the unit of measure is. It's unspecified here, so if you wanted to, you could just write square units, 108 square units, or units squared. Okay, let's try another one. So again, I have to identify the figure. This is a prism, right? Okay, because it's got two congruent parallel sides in it, so it is a prism. So I'll use the same formula. The surface area is equal to pH plus 2b. Alright, now in a rectangular prism, remember prisms are named by the shape of their base. In a rectangular prism, the dilemma is, well, which side do I need to use for the bases? Because the front and the back are congruent and parallel, the left and the right are congruent and parallel, and the top and the bottom are congruent and parallel. The answer is you could use any ones that you want. Okay? The answer for the full surface area would not be affected. If they ask you for lateral area, you would get different lateral areas based on which two you used as the bases. But if they ask you for lateral area of a rectangular prism, they should specify which two sides to use as your bases. All right? But in this case, we have our choice because we'll get the same answer. Let's just use the front and the back as the bases like we did in the last one. So I want the perimeter of the front face. So perimeter, that'd be 8 plus 16 plus 8 plus 16. So that would be 32 plus another 16, 48. So 48 is the perimeter times. The height, remember, is from base to base. We said we're using the front and the back as bases, so from base to base would be 10 plus 2 times b is the area of the base. Well, once again, what's the shape of the base? Rectangle. How do I find area of a rectangle? Length times width. 16 times 8 is 128. All right. So now it's just a matter of doing 48 times 10 plus 2 times 48. When you add all that together, you would see that you get 736 square units is the correct answer. All right. So it's just a matter of knowing which one, what each one of these letters stand for, and plugging in the right thing into the right place. Okay, let's try the next one now. And once again, I'm asked to find the surface area of this figure. This figure is a triangular prism because the front and the back are congruent and parallel. Those would be the bases, and a prism is named by the shape of its bases, triangular prism. So again, we're using the same formula. S equals pH plus 2b. And so P is the perimeter of the base. P is the perimeter of the base. Alright? So the perimeter of the base would be 4 plus 8 plus whatever this is. I look to the back, it's not given to us like it was in the first problem. So I need to figure out what this hypotenuse is so that I can add all three sides together and get the perimeter. How can we do it? You've got a right triangle. One side is missing. You can use the Pythagorean theorem. So we have to go off to the side and do the Pythagorean theorem here, which would be 4 squared plus 8 squared equals 2x squared. The hypotenuse would be x. Alright, so again, if I squared both of these, added them together, and took the square root, in other words, solve this thing for x, that would be 8.94. And again, it'd be 4 squared, which is 16, plus 32, whatever that adds up to, and then the square root of that is how you get this. Okay, so that would be, let's see, 8.94, remember, is here now. 8.94. But remember, 8.94 doesn't go in for P because that's not the perimeter. That's only one side. I had to find this in order to get everything I need for the perimeter. So now the perimeter would be 8 plus 4, which is 12, plus 8.94, which is 20.94. All right. So there's kind of a lot in there just to get the perimeter of the base. So make sure you understand what we did. We used the Pythagorean theorem to get this, and then don't forget to go back and add all three sides together. Now the height is from base to base. We can pick that off right away as 6 plus 2 times area of the base. So once again, I have to go off to the side and calculate the area of this triangle. Area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. So it'll be 1/2. What's the base? 8. What's the height? 4. Okay. Half of 8 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. So the area of the base is 16. And now we've got everything that we need to plug into the calculator and come up with the right answer. If you plug these in, add them up, you would get 157.64, and that is your surface area.